Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey, my team and I are offering a 3-day intensive retreat in San Diego, California. This retreat is going to be so powerful and transformative. My team and I will show you how to discover yourself, your true potential, and help you find your path and purpose in life and uncover the warrior's courage that is within you. I literally put my heart and soul into this program, and the reason why you want this is because I will save you time and money from having to figure out all of this on your own. There are only 10 spots available for the retreat, so go to kfmretreat.com to learn more and apply for the program. Again, that's kfmretreat.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I am here with Albert Podell. This man, former Playboy editor, has visited every country on earth. Yes, that's right. So Podell's new book, Around the World in 50 Years, shares his incredible adventures, including blasting his way out of minefields, coming within seconds of being lynched, and coping with riots, voodoo priests, robbers, and Cape Buffalo, along with insights into cultures and societies most Americans have never heard of. So, Albert, I'm happy to have you here on the show.
And I'm delighted to be here, and I think your audience is perfect for this kind of adventure.
All right. I'm excited. Let's dive in with a favorite success quote or some sort of saying that you've lived by, and then explain to the audience why you chose that.
Well, I guess the saying I live by mostly is you only go around once, so grab all the gusto you can. I really believe that, and I've tried to live as full a life as humanly possible. I mean, rather than like try and climb the corporate ladder, what I would do, I would have a career, get near the top, and then move to another career for a challenge. I've had careers now as an editor, a freelance writer, creative director of advertising agencies specializing in motion pictures, vice president of an ad agency, a good government lobbyist in Albany, an attorney, and a theatrical producer. I had a wife a long time ago, and then I decided, women were another form of gusto, and I've had about 3,000 interesting relationships with them, which will be the subject of the next book. But it's a good model to live by. Just go for it. I mean, it's hard to do if you're going to be a responsible, respectable person and raise a family with kids, because you got to balance that out, And I decided early on that kids were not part of the equation. They just, this may sound very callous, but given a choice between a day of skiing and a day of changing diapers, I would take the skiing or the scuba diving or the mountain climbing or the surfing or the boarding or the kayaking or all my other sports. Fortunately, the whole country doesn't live the way I do, but for me, it's perfect.
I like how you've had so many different jobs. And why do you think you've gone from one job to one job to one job versus sticking with one and just being with that one job for 30, 40 years?
Well, the same reason when I climb mountains, I don't want to climb the same mountain over and over again. Or when I ride a wave, I don't want to ride the same wave endlessly. I like the challenge. And it's not that different, really. If you look at all my main jobs, which were, as I said, editor, advertising, lobbyist, and lawyer, they are all the same in that they all involve communication, and they all involve trying to persuade your audience to agree with you. In other words, if you're an editor, you're trying to persuade them to read this book, see this movie, wear this clothing. If you're in advertising, go buy this product. If you're a lobbyist, support my bill. And if you're a trial lawyer, as I was, believe my client. So they all involve oral advocacy skills, so it was very easy to transition from one to the other, and yet each career involved its own challenges, which I liked.
And so with all these different jobs, how did you find the time to travel the world? What led you to complete and successfully touch every country?
Probably several things. One, when I was age 6, I started a stamp collection, and the other kids specialized, like in Ireland or Italy or Israel or wherever their parents came from. I wanted a stamp at age 6 from every country in the world. And as I looked at those stamps, I said, gee, these are interesting people, interesting animals, these llamas and elephants and alpacas and interesting artifacts. I got to get out there and see these things for real. So when I was 26, I led the longest automobile expedition ever made around the world. It took us 581 days to circumnavigate the globe in a latitudinal direction. And I was just totally hooked on travel. And then I said, well, let me see if I can go to every country in the world.
Okay. I think this is a good place to just let you go here. Share with us your story and some of your adventures from traveling across the world. I want to hear them from the man himself who's gone around the world. Okay.
Again, I'm not sure if they're all inspirational, but let me start with a sort of a gentle story. I think it has a lot of pathos. When I was in Tuvalu, as an island nation in the South Pacific, that's probably the first nation in the world that will sink beneath the waves of the rising ocean, I got a little bored there after a day or two, so I organized a group to go snorkeling. And I was approached by the translator for a Japanese girl. The Japanese girl was an Olympic badminton champion, but she was a deaf mute. Couldn't hear, couldn't talk. And she wanted to go with us, the translator explained, because for the first time in her life, she would be equal to all the rest of humanity. Nobody underwater can talk and nobody underwater can hear. So she felt, no longer would she be a child of a lesser god. And it was such a wonderful story. We took her with us, even though she had no experience in either scuba or snorkeling. Unfortunately, she had so little experience that we all backflipped in over a shallow reef. She leaped in feet first and stung her foot on a spiny coral there, started bleeding profusely, and within seconds, a monster tiger shark came homing in on the blood. We shoved her quickly into the boat, and that was the end of her experience in trying to be equal to all the other people. We had to rush her to the nearest island and put on a tourniquet and treat her and stop the bleeding. And it just made me very sad that she wasn't able to realize that dream. You mentioned blowing our way out of a minefield. We camped late one night in on the sort of no man's land between Morocco and Tunisia after crossing the border, and we didn't realize we were going into a minefield. They had some signs with skull and crossbones along the road, but we didn't see them at night. And the next morning, a French army officer on a megaphone woke us up screaming that we were in the middle of a minefield. And he said that it would take 5 days for their mine expert to rotate back there. And we didn't have 5 days to wait. So Steve, who was the co-leader of my expedition, had an idea. We had a bow and arrow sponsor. So we took the bow and arrow, we tied a string, like 100 feet of string to the arrow. We tied wire to the string, and at the end of the wire, we tied the winch cable to the winch on the front of our land cruiser. So we shot the arrow to the road. The people there reeled it in, including the winch cable, tied like some 60-pound boulder to the winch, and we hauled that back and forth until we had blown all the mines out of the way, and we were able to drive on.
Jesus. Wow.
Probably the worst, closest I've come to, well, I came very close to death on the Pacori River in Costa Rica. I've done a lot of whitewater rafting, and usually it's not that dangerous unless you got sunk down into a hole. Normally when the boat capsizes, as it often does, you get flipped free and you got a life vest on, and you float down and you eventually end up on shore, and it's not so bad. In this case, I was weirdly positioned on the gunwale of the raft, so my shoes, my feet, were under the gunwale, and then if you can imagine, I'm sitting on the gunwale with my butt, so my butt is sort of pushing down on the feet. Anyway, the raft sort of half flipped, and I was tossed into the water on my back, but my feet were still stuck under the gunwale of the raft. And I was about 3 inches underwater, but I was drowning. I mean, the water was just pouring into my mouth. I could not rise up because of the pressure of the water. I couldn't twist free because the weight of my butt and my thighs were pushing down and preventing me from extricating my feet. And I thought I was gone. And then my girlfriend, Anna, at the risk of overturning the raft, she abandoned her spot on the other side, carefully on her stomach, crawled over, reached over the side, grabbed the straps of my life vest, and hauled me back in. Another minute or two would have been over. In East Pakistan, I said I came within a minute of being lynched. Our expedition had crossed into East Pakistan 1965, the day the war started with India, and we were suspected of being Indian spies. I mean, who in their right mind crosses a border between two warring countries the day the war starts? I found out the locals were going to demonstrate against the United States outside the offices of the United States Information Agency. They were angry that America was giving arms to India, although we gave plenty of arms to Pakistan too. I wanted to take some photos, and I ran across the street. There was this big stone building there with balconies pointing right toward the USIA. This was perfect. I ran up to the 4th floor, got out on the balcony, squatted down with my telephoto lens, and I got grabbed by 2 Army officers. Turned out the building was the Pakistan Ministry of Defense. There I was the day after the war started, hiding on a balcony with the telephoto lens in the Ministry of Defense. They dragged me into a big room, and the civil defense workers came swarming in to see the Indian spy, me. And they started chanting, "Hang him, hang him, hang him." And the dutiful janitor there went and got a stout rope, and they threw it over a beam, and they put it around my neck. And I was literally within a minute of being lynched. I mean, you can read the book to find out how I avoided it, or I could tell you, listeners, but it's kind of a gross story, so I'm not sure you want me to do that on the air.
Yeah, do it.
You sure?
Yes.
All right, you asked for it. Well, I had been suffering from a gastrointestinal problem for about a week. I didn't know at the time what it was. It turned out to be giardiasis from having ingested some cardiolamblia in the water in India. And my bowels, instead of having normal bowel movements, they were like watery in the color of bananas. So what I did, I kept telling these people I was out on the balcony because I couldn't find a bathroom, and they obviously didn't believe me. So what I did, I twisted free, I pulled down my pants, I did a 360-degree turn while I explosively shat this bright yellow crap all over the place, creating a little moat around myself that nobody was eager to cross with all the crap on the floor. And at least they believed me. Well, they didn't know if it didn't prove I was not a spy. I mean, I could still be a very clever spy with a disgusting party trick. But what they did, they called up the American embassy and the consulate. The consul came over. I had registered there that morning. He identified me, and I eventually got released.
That wasn't too bad.
Well, I don't know what your listeners are used to. Another close call came in Baghdad, where a kid pretended that when I was driving, he ran up against the car and did a backflip. He pretended to be hurt, and he wasn't, but I was put in jail awaiting trial. And as I'm standing in the jail on this dirt floor, this woman comes and pulls out a knife and comes running right at me with this huge dagger raised over her head, and I duck, and she stabs the guy next to me, who turned out to be her husband, with whom she'd been having a fight. And that was a little scary because I didn't know who she was aiming at. The bright side was they had a very intelligent judge there. We should only have this system. You know, this happened in the United States and somebody accused me of having run them over. You know, it'd be 3 years of lawyering before we got to court. What the judge said to the kid, he said, look, you go in the hospital right now for an x-ray. If the x-ray shows you got no broken bones, I'm letting this American go. And that's what happened. He sent him to the hospital, waited an hour, got the x-ray results, and I was free to go. You know, they often say justice delayed is justice denied, and they were in those days certainly not delaying justice in Baghdad.
Wow. A lot of close calls here with death and kind of some funny scenarios of how you're staying alive.
Well, much of my book, Around the World in 50 Years, is about getting into and out of either terrifying or desperate kinds of situations. Because, you know, in 50 years of going to some of the roughest, most difficult countries in the world, you know, Somalia and South Sudan and Uganda and Kenya and the Middle East and Egypt and Libya, you know, you have to expect some close calls.
Yeah. What are some of the hardest adjustments that you have to make when you go to all these different countries and then when you come back to America?
Well, one of the hardest adjustments, having been spoiled by my job at Playboy, spoiled for life, I'm very accustomed to the company of tall, beautiful blondes. They are very hard to find in Asia, extremely hard to find in the Middle East, and almost impossible to find in Africa. So I'm often on the road alone for 60 days without a companion. That can be a little rough. And, you know, I sometimes will bring a girlfriend from home, but only if it's a safe country. And, you know, half the countries I went to were not safe for women. So that was kind of difficult. But one of the biggest adjustments came after the expedition around the world. We were gone for 19 months, and it happened to be the most explosive, game-changing months in American culture because it was the time of the Beatles, and we got back and there were go-go girls and teeny boppers and mini skirts and mods and rockers and Herman's Hermits on the radio and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and our quiet, staid Eisenhower-era conventional country had suddenly become a turned-on, tuned-in, teeny-bopper go-go land. It was an amazing transformation. I mean, I don't think that Marco Polo, returning to Italy after 30 years of a Genghis Khan, could have found a more startling transformation in his homeland.
Okay. Now, if you could go back and do one day over again, which one would that be?
Oh, dear. It would probably be the day that I was courting this gorgeous British college student at a campsite in Lilongwe, the capital of Malawi. I was taking her pictures and chatting her up, and, you know, a little 50-year age difference, maybe more, but I thought I was making really good progress. And then at the end of the day, she says, will you send me some pictures? And I said, how do you mean? She said, email to me. So I say, I'm really not good with this email stuff, but what I will do on my way back in 4 or 5 weeks, I'll route myself through London, and I'll take you out to dinner, and I'll give you the photographs. And I figured, after that, I'm going to be in. She says to me, oh, it's very sweet of you, but don't bother. Ask one of your grandchildren to show you how to put the photos as an attachment and send it to me.
Okay. So what would you have done differently in that situation?
Well, I probably wouldn't have gotten into it in the first place. I mean, I have no grandchildren, and usually I can do well with young women, but this was really shattering the way she put me down. I mean, here I am offering to come to London, take her to dinner, and she says, just email me the photos and have one of your grandchildren show you. Maybe I would have put on a different cologne. I don't know. But that was a big loss. Another thing I probably would not have done on one trip to Botswana and Namibia, which are safe countries generally, in the sense that, there are not many muggers or jihadis or rapists running around. I did take my girlfriend, lovely Ukrainian lady, Anna, at the time, and she was a bit of a leadfoot when it came to driving. And we drove through Etosha National Park, which had lots of elephants and giraffes on the road, and you had to go about no more than 35 miles an hour, probably less. So after 2 days of that, we get out of Etosha, and she hits the gas. And I say, whoa, you can be a lot of wild animals out here, too. We're on the edge of the park. Take it easy. She's speeding along, and out of the bush, the road is lined with bush where you can't see anything, comes a huge wild boar with her, piglets. And we could not possibly stop. I mean, they were about 30 feet in front of us, and at that speed, we probably needed 300 feet to stop. So we missed the big mama boar by an inch, and Anna smashed into one of the smaller boars, and we were in a VW, and it nearly wrecked the car. I mean, it broke the headlight, it broke the fender off, it even dented the undercarriage, and we were very lucky to not have been killed in that accident.
Wow.
I should have realized the day before she had bottomed out the car, where we were driving on some roller coastery roads, and I should have just realized that a lead-footed New York, New Jersey driver accustomed to throughways, or even one of your Los Angeles drivers on your freeways, they're not going to slow down enough to make room for the animals. So I probably should have taken over the driving there. That's definitely one thing I'd like to do over again.
Wow. Another close call here. I'm interested to know, what have you learned about life from experiencing all the cultures of the world?
That it's precious, that it's fleeting, that it can be gone in a day. I mean, I've seen people killed by child soldiers for nothing more than, maybe spitting in front of them. So it can just be gone. I've learned that people around the world are generally, this is with the exception of a few weird places like maybe North Korea, which I don't really get into the mentality there, they're pretty much the same almost anywhere, particularly, they want their family to be happy, they want their children to be healthy, they want their kids to succeed in life, they like to live in peace. That is pretty much universal, I think, that kind of feeling. What amazes me is that people in a third of the world are able to live on $1.50 a day. I mean, they don't live well, and some of them, die prematurely, but can you imagine having $1.50 a day in your pocket, and that has to cover your accommodations, your food, your clothing, your medicine, your incidentals, everything. I mean, I don't know how they do it. Some Americans and Europeans that work for NGOs go there, and they can barely get along on $200 a day.
Yeah. So a whole difference in way of living and...
they've learned to be frugal. They've learned to reduce their carbon footprint. They've learned to live on very, very little. And it's a good lesson there. I mean, the gap between what we spend and what they spend, the gap between the amount of our carbon footprint, which is the largest per person in the world, and what they do, which is maybe 1/20th of our carbon footprint, it's just astounding, and it's unnecessary. I mean, we have to learn to conserve more. We just trash everything. We throw things in the garbage. We don't recycle enough. We leave food uneaten and just toss it out. We're a very, very wasteful country.
And how has this changed you as a person?
Well, that hasn't changed me particularly, because I was always one of these kids that, ate everything on my plate because my mother told me that people in India were starving. I never made the connection between how my eating everything on my plate would help them, but I did. But it's just such a disparity that if this really is one world and all people are our brothers, there has to be some mechanism in which we can eliminate this kind of really unnecessary inequality. Even in our own country where, 1 or 2% of the people control 90% of the net wealth, it's just not my idea of what democracy is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. On your travels, who would you say was the most interesting man that you met?
Probably Lami Gabriel Kronheim Abraham. Lami billed himself as the world's most famous camel driver. He'd been in a lot of Cecil B. DeMille movies like The Ten Commandments, and this was in the 60s, and he thought he spoke in the latest hip Hollywood lingo. We met him, he came running up to us on his camel saying, "Hey, kiddo, 23 skidoo," and away we go. And he was just utterly charming. His camel, Canada Dry, pronounced like the soda, but I don't know if it was an intentional pun. The dry was spelled D-R-A-Y, like a dray horse. That camel had been the one that posed with Winston Churchill and the Queen of Sweden and all the posters that you saw in the 60s and 70s of Egypt with the sun setting and the pyramids in the background and the Sahara spreading before you. That was usually Lami and his camel, and we spent a day taking photos with him for the sponsors of our expedition, and we went to his home and met his crippled son, and we really got to know him very well, and he was just a wise, wonderful, very benevolent person. He was just, there are 3 or 4 pages in my book, Around the World in 50 Years, about him, and we just absolutely adored the man.
Wow. It must be so hard to choose from one guy. There's so many people that you've met on your travels.
Well, Lami was the good guy. On the other side, there was this reckless chief of police, Arab chief of police in Algeria, who ran us off the road because he was such a bad driver, refused to apologize, got into a big fight with us. Finally, we made friends. At that time, we'd been giving a hitchhike to 3 very attractive New Zealand nurses, and this chief of police said, "I want to buy that girl from you." He figured now that we're all friends. He picked out Barbara, who was the, let's say, the most voluptuous of the 3 girls, and he seriously wanted to buy her. And, you can't just say no to somebody like that without causing him to lose tremendous face. So I had to do some very skillful bargaining where I tried to not get him to accept the price I was asking for Barbara. Unfortunately,
I'm not even sure
I
what to
asked
say
for
to
what
that.
I thought was an outrageous amount. Now, we're talking $1965. I asked for $3,000. And he turned it down twice, and I said, "Well, I guess we don't have a deal." And then the last minute he said, "I'll take her." And I said, "Oh, my God, what am I going to do?" So what I said, "Well, we can't sell her alone. You have to take these other 2 girls with her, and I'll tell you what, I'll give you a deal. You can have the 3 of them for $7,000. I was pretty sure he turned that down. And he walked over to one of the other girls, and he pinched her until she screamed, and he said, "Nah, these are scrawny chickens. I mean, a camel driver wouldn't have women like these. I don't want them." I said, no, we promised their mothers we'd sell them all as a group. And we dickered around for a while, and as I hoped, he said, no, I'm not going to take the 3 of them. And I said, "Well, gee, I'm sorry. You're such a good friend. We love you. We'd like you to have Barbara, but we have to sell all 3. And we got out of that situation.
So you've gotten pretty good at negotiation through your travels.
Through my travels, and I did in the middle of all this go to NYU Law School. I took a class there in negotiating, and that helped a little. But I think negotiating is the same around the world. You just try and figure out what the other person's bottom line is, what's the most they'll pay or the least they'll take, and then you decide if that's acceptable to you, and you work your way around it.
Yeah, I like that. Just looking at what they want, looking at what you want, and then finding common terms.
Right.
Now, what advice would you give to people who would love to travel? They would love to get out of the country, travel to another continent, and explore and learn more about life, but they have the excuse of maybe like, I don't have the time or the money.
Okay, let's take the time. I mean, everybody that has, well, if you don't have a job, you certainly have the time. If you have a job, I mean, almost everybody gets at least 2 weeks vacation. And, you speak to your boss, you skip 2 weeks 1 year, and you got 4 weeks vacation, and you take it. So you do have the time. In terms of money, it's not that much. I mean, you can live in, let's say, South America or Africa. You can live okay on a $10 a day budget. I mean, it's not luxurious. My hotel budget was like $5 or $6 a night. I would sleep in a junky native place that had a rickety, noisy ceiling fan, had bugs, had mosquitoes, had a lumpy mattress, but still. And, I eat at the curbside stalls, where food is cheap. I don't eat in restaurants, and the meals are maybe 50 cents, maybe $1. And, you got some insect repellent, you got a long sleeve shirt to keep off the mosquitoes. You can live very cheaply. South Pacific, you can live really cheaply. You bring a tent along, as I often do. So the idea that money and time are an impediment, they're not really an impediment. I mean, if you really want to travel, you can do it.
Yeah. And, would you say that traveling for you has just been a priceless experience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it builds up your confidence tremendously, because if you feel you can get out of situations in foreign countries, then you can also manage to get out of similar situations in business or whatever you're doing. You learn how to spend your time, you learn how to handle other people, and it can be a tremendously confidence-building learning experience. And it also gives you a perspective on the world that few others have. It makes you appreciate things that others don't. It is, aside from going to college, I'd say there's nothing as educational as traveling, particularly in exotic countries. And if I can get a little plug in, if any of your listeners are interested in doing it but worried about how to do it, I have out an ebook. It's only 99 cents. It's by me, Albert Podell. It's called Survival Manual for the Adventurous International Traveler. It tells you how to plan your route, how to pack, what airlines to use, what medicines to take, how to avoid diseases, how to treat the water, how to avoid the bandits and the robbers. And it's about 60 pages. And it tells you just about everything you need to know to keep yourself safe.
All right. I like it. All right. This is good. And I think traveling can provide so much value to one's growth in general. And like you said, confidence builder. I like it. And Albert, let's now jump into the knowledge round. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions here. So are you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, I want to share with you more about the Knowledge for Men 3-day intensive retreat. I will show you how to discover yourself so you'll know exactly who you are, what you want, and have the conviction on how to get there. You can become a leader so you can achieve greatness in all aspects of your life and become the man you want to be. It is all lying within us dormant until the right teacher helps us tap into our inner warrior. You will be tested, challenged, and pushed beyond your limits. And together, we will push the boundaries of what is really possible in your life. So go to kfmretreat.com to apply because there are only 10 spots for the retreat, and there are thousands of people listening to this right now. When the 10 spots are gone, they're gone. So go to kfmretreat.com and join me now. This is your time. I'd love to serve you in building and creating a bigger life. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime.
First question here, Albert, is what advice would you give to someone who's feeling really lost or unsure of their purpose?
Well, that's a good question. This may be a little bit of a technical answer, but I took twice in my life and found them very helpful vocational guidance tests. They've got it down to a science now, and what they do, they match your abilities and your interests. There's just no sense having a job or career that, let's say, you have the ability for it, but you have no interest in it. Similarly, doesn't make sense to have an interest, say, in being an opera singer if you have no ability to sing. So they find what are your strengths in terms of the things you can do best, and what are your interests in terms of the things you're most interested in. They combine the two. They pointed me to 3 careers. I tried all 3 of them, was happy in all 3 of them. It's a very good way to unlose yourself, to take a good vocational guidance set of tests.
I get it. And Albert, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think part of the problem was that I grew up Jewish in a very working class Italian-Irish neighborhood in Brooklyn in the 50s, and I had a real hard time with the other kids. I was accused of having killed Christ, even though I swore I was nowhere near the place 2,000 years before. And that made it really difficult because if most of your peers, most of your contemporaries think you are worthless, you can grow up kind of thinking you're worthless. I think that a lot of Afro-American kids and a lot of Hispanic kids and Native American kids suffer the same kind of a problem where much of society treats them like they're worthless and they're not going to go anywhere. And you can either succumb to it and, become a drunk or a druggie or a dropout, or you can say, I'm going to show these guys that they're wrong. In grade school, I won the science medal, the English medal, and the math medal. In high school, I ran the largest student newspaper in the country. In college, I won the Senior Oration Award. It depends how you handle people dissing you. It depends how you handle adversity. You can cave into it, or you can strive to rise above it. And that decision can determine the entire course of your life.
And Albert, can you name a person who's had a tremendous impact on your life, like such as a mentor? Who is this person and how have they impacted your life?
Oh, I had this very wise school teacher when I was in 5th or 6th grade, and we were learning drawing, and I wasn't learning. I mean, the other kids were picking it up, and I was still drawing stick figures after 2 or 3 months. A lot of other teachers would have given me a remedial class. They would have yelled at me. They would have given me extra homework. We were preparing a big exhibition. We were working on the Nutcracker Suite, the ballet, and all the kids were drawing pictures from the Nutcracker Suite. And what she said to me, she said, Albert, look, I already have 30 kids drawing pictures. Why don't you write captions about the pictures? And those will be the only captions there. And I said, gee, that sounds like a good idea. So I wrote the captions, and sure enough, they were under everybody's picture, my captions, and everybody had one picture, and I had 30 captions. And I said, gee, this writing stuff is kind of neat. So after that, I wrote something for the Mimeograph School magazine. I wrote a poem that got me on the newspaper at high school and eventually became the editor-in-chief. And since then, I've written 250 published articles and 3 books, and I'm on the 4th. And it would not have happened if this woman had insisted I draw pictures. But she knew that was hopeless. She saw something that I could write, and she very gently and wisely led me in that direction to be a writer. And I am forever grateful to her for doing that.
Wow. And talking about books, speaking of books, what would you say are two or three of your most influential books, and why?
Okay. They're probably not necessarily influential in the way you might think. One of them was I had a cousin, he's dead now, named Max Lerner, who was a columnist, political columnist for the New York Post. He was like under Walter Lippmann during the 40s and 50s. He was very highly regarded, but he just never quite made it to the very top rank. Anyway, he wrote a huge book called America as a Civilization, and he inscribed a copy to me, and he said, and I know it word for word, to Albert, who will someday write his own and a better version. And I knew that he was being just generous and kind, but I kept thinking, gee, that is really a goal to shoot for. And I think if Max were alive today and he looked down from heaven and read around the world in 50 years, he would find that I've sort of done a little bit for the world that he did for America in the sense of showing what civilizations are like. I mean, there are about 10 or 15 civilizations like North Korea and Tuvalu and Nauru and New Guinea that we're not that familiar with here that I have tried to explain in my book. So that was definitely one inspiration. A second inspiration would be some novelists like Thomas Hardy or Charles Dickens who took just ordinary people and were able to fashion enthralling books out of them. And it made me realize that almost anything can be made interesting and exciting. I mean, if you can take a street urchin like Oliver Twist and make a magnificent book out of it, you know, almost anything can be grist for the mill. I'm trying to think of a third book. I mean, I've probably read I have a library upstate that has about 7,000 books that I've read. I'm not sure what the third one would be. There's so many to choose from.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot of books. Now, Albert, what would you say are 2 or maybe 3 life skills that you need in order to succeed as a world traveler?
Well, let's see. I think you have to be compassionate. You have to try and understand people, even if they're on the far end of the spectrum from you. Even these crazy terrorists and ISIS and jihadis, you know, if you trace most of them back, you find they come from either impoverished Arabic countries or unwelcoming European countries, and they often were unemployed. So it's not like they just flipped out and went crazy, but, you know, you live in a slum, you live in a ghetto all your life, people don't respect you, you don't have a job, you can't really afford to go out on dates or anything. So even some of the most evil people, if you try and trace it back to their roots, you get a little bit of compassion for them. On the other hand, some of the ISIS people, are just religious zealots, and that for me is really hard to understand. I mean, I try and do it, but I don't see how a member of any one religion can believe it's the only religion and try and impose his will on all the other people. Another skill I think you need for negotiating all these countries, I think you have to be willing to live like the natives live where they live, eat what they eat. For instance, in the course of my travels, I ate tree grubs, tarantulas, armadillo, live monkey brains, rats in Ghana, dung beetles, grubs, waxworms. You know, you can't just import your American standards. You have to be flexible, adaptable, and try to go with the flow in these countries. So that's very important. And the third thing is to be reasonable and respectful. And just because you are from America and we have a high standard of living here, it doesn't mean that we're better than people in impoverished countries, and we should respect them for who they are and what they have, and when we're there, we should try and fit in rather than push them around and tell them how great we are.
Yeah, that's really kind of like putting yourself in their shoes and understanding why they do what they do. And I think often it's easy to overlook that and just see your own point of view.
Absolutely.
We'll just conclude the knowledge round there, but let's just go into what's exciting you today. What are you looking forward to? What's getting you out of bed in the morning today?
Well, I'm not saying she's getting me out of bed, but 3 days after I finished going to the last country in the world, I married a tall, blue-eyed, blonde Russian girl who is just amazing. And she is 28 years old, and I'm 78, and it's just an amazingly wonderful relationship. We're both very compatible and very happy with each other. So, again, I can't say it gets me out of bed in the morning, but it makes me very happy. And the other thing I'm looking forward to, my book, Around the World in 50 Years, is published next week on March 24th. I'm looking forward to the reception that it gets. It's so far been written up in in Fortune, AARP, the Daily Mail, the Atlantic, American Way, so it's getting good traction. I'm looking forward to its debut. And I'm looking forward to what will probably be my last book, which is a book of my sexual adventures starting way back with Playboy. It's tentatively titled, I don't know if the title will survive, Pussy Galore. And I'm looking forward to that. So I got a lot to look forward to.
All right, there it is. Albert Podell, his book is coming out next week, Around the World in 50 Years. You can check that out on Amazon. And Albert, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story, being vulnerable, and all the wild and crazy adventures that you've been through. So I appreciate your time, Albert.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope some of your listeners have benefited from some of the life lessons I was able to learn.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge from It podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.